Good morning. This is Alan Badeau, CTO for NCI. I want to thank everybody for joining our LinkedIn Live webinar. I hope you enjoyed our application modernization webinar that we presented in May. This month's topic is on predicting human behavior with our animated personas. And I'm excited to also have with me Mr. Tom Malick, who is our VP of Software Architecture, and Ms. Mariya Karimova, Director of our Machine Learning Architecture. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take a moment to discuss NCI and talk about the partnerships that we've had for at least 30 years, especially on the Department of Defense side, but as well as some of our civilian agency customers, especially FCC and CMS. You know, over those times, we were a IT system integrator and provided numerous mission critical support services for those customers. Over the last 3 years, we've begun to invest significantly in our artificial intelligence offerings, and many of those started out from an RPA perspective, and then we significantly expanded our service offerings to include machine learning and integration of machine learning into our RPA system. And then also, of course, as you heard last month, our AI application modernization using the Holonic code intent solution in our enterprise brain offering. This month, we're talking more about, our next offering and next generation solution around how we're using our animated personas to solve some of our customers' problems. This is especially evident in our work at the joint service provider, working toward delivering a AI solution that's going to help facilitate numerous cost savings for our customers. And we've done the same thing for other commercial and international customers as well. Next slide, please. The foundation for all of our service offerings is our NCI Empower platform. And it's an open architecture platform. It's commercially available to provide secure containerized access to our AI solutions. And at the end of the day, what we're doing is we are overlaying our AI solutions on top of already present applications, as well as infrastructures that's available for our customers that they have already. The last thing that we want to do is have to come in and recommend a complete overhaul of the infrastructure before we can integrate our AI service offerings into that ecosystem. And so we've streamlined that functionality, and Empower is the way that we're doing that. Next slide, please. So within Empower, we have what are called empowerments, and the empowerments are, our individual offerings that we talked about, all the time. So augmenting a service desk with RPA, or integrating a chatbot into the service desk, as well as augmenting, and deploying machine learning capabilities into a service desk or any environment where there are highly repeatable tasks, so that we can put a human on the loop as opposed to a human in the loop. And that allows us to continuously drive efficiencies across the enterprise. Of course, our animated personas is one of the empowerments, and that'll be the focus of today. But overall, as we go through the Empower Me, which is really the individual user's experience with the platform, and then the Evolve platform piece of the Empower platform, that allows us to monitor all of our AI deployments in any customer environment. And key to Evolve is really the seamless integration across that entire portfolio, so that we can provide near real-time information on how our AI platform is performing within each individual environment. Next slide, please. I'd like to turn it over to Tom Malick now, who's going to do a deep dive into the animated personas. Tom?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Tom Malick with NCI, and I'd like to start by taking a quick poll. Donna, do you have the poll?
The poll is up, Tom.
Oh, okay, got it. All right. So the question is, have you ever needed to find out how people might respond to an idea or approach before you actually implement it? All right. See a few responses there, all at 100%. So obviously that is an important feature and capability that many of us have. So I'll go ahead and start by describing, what a persona is. An animated persona, it's a very advanced type of AI that mimics the reactions of a particular human or a group of humans. They were originally developed for marketers and socio-political research type of capabilities, but we've expanded them to even broader uses. They're representative of individuals, but not tied to any specific individual. And as such, they can be protective of privacy. They're inexpensive to create and highly effective in modeling and predicting responses that are representative of the individuals or those groups. The animated personas allow us to develop a better understanding of the needs, the wants, and the preferences of the target audience. We can build a variety of personas, things like iPhone mom or Gen Z BMX dude, white collar Florida retiree, or ones that we've created that address things like immediate health crises, like the concerns about COVID-19. Mariya will be discussing those, and I think you'll be very interested in seeing how those work. Can even create an animated persona of an actual individual if enough information is known. There are personas for famous people like Victor Hugo, Martin Luther King Jr., Stan Lee, the comic book guy, other historical figures, and the founder of our partner company in this space, Tanjo, even created a persona of his father. It's a very interesting thing. Next slide, please. So how is an animated persona made and used? Well, it's really based on an 8-step creation process that we're going to discuss on the next slide. But we start by training the persona on large amounts of data based on what is already known about the person's group or the preferences of a person group. And the behaviors and interests within those people and groups. We can use writings about an individual, such as Victor Hugo, where we can aggregate data from a group, such as search records, social media trends, shopping behaviors, media preferences, and things of the like. The more data the animated persona has, the more closely it will, actually respond like the target individual or group that's being synthesized. The more data, of course, the more data that it has, that's going to be the basis for, making it be able to respond, most effectively. Once that persona is created, it's released onto the web where it can, continue to grow and evolve just as people do, and that's really why the data is so important. It responds to newly, available information, and it adjusts its interests and preferences in response, to emerging trends and develops opinions. Mariya will also demonstrate that next. Once we have that, then it can actually be used to query, reactions and predict responses, which is really, the basis of the polling question. And we can think, address things like, what will the iPhone mom, think about a new fashion trend or a kitchen gadget design? What will the Gen Z BMX guy think about the upcoming election? How will a white-collar Florida retiree respond to a proposed new ad campaign? Or things, front and center for us today is, how will a representative group react to different things about COVID-19, for example? We can interact with and, query the persona in many of the same ways that you would an actual human being. We do this by surveying the persona and asking it questions through Q&A, or we can send it messages for it to react to, or simply observe the actual behavior online and see how it reacts to the newly emerging trends. Next slide, please. So this chart here really is the deep dive on the persona development process. I won't go over each piece of this individually, but I will go over the overall process for you. And this 8-step process is really based on behavioral science, and it continues to develop based on the real data as we discussed. So we want to gather as much data as we can for the target population, and then we create what's called the interest graph. And this is the machine learning system, along with the interaction of a human analyst. It generates a list of topic areas of interest, specific interests, sentiments, choice preferences, those types of things. They're correlated and clustered into pattern groups. And this includes not only, predictable or pinpointable concepts such as civil rights or COVID-19, for example, that's kind of in a supervised way, but also, unexpected concepts that, really only the machine detects, such as things that are common across an entire demographic group. And that's really more of an unsupervised type of data gathering. The map of interest, concepts, and sentiment, it then makes up the persona model. An interest graph, is really what makes up the brain of the persona. It can be visualized, like the photo that we showed on the previous slide, with the hierarchies of interests and concepts that make up the larger whole. The interest graph, really depicts the hierarchical interest area nodes and the corresponding weights and the strengths of those particular data points. Once it's configured and activated, then the persona model can be then exposed to online content and articles and videos for information objects that really match the interests and preferences of the persona. It then reads those items, or it watches the videos, and the way it really currently does that is by reading the closed captioning text of a video. And it can rank the content that it encounters with an interest score. And this reveals, to the human analyst, its preferences for media forms, communication models, and specific language and topics of interest to the persona. Once all those topics have been scored, then it creates what's called the word cloud, which is really the central point of all of these data points that have been gathered for the persona. So at this point, we really have a persona with a complete hierarchy of interest graphs. The persona continues to scrape literally tens of thousands of sources every day to pull in the most popular and relevant content. Each piece of the content is then examined by the persona and scored against those interest graphs and against the topic maps of the persona. Once all the behavior data is then incorporated, we reach what we really would say is a data fuse level that permits us to view daily lifestyle information from the model, and eventually even interact with the persona. So out of all of these things, we really see the differentiators in this capability as being a couple of things. One, the behavior modeling. Two, the live interaction that can happen with the persona. The fact that the personas evolve over time, and and it's all based on the information that they have access to, just like a real person. And that the personas really develop themselves and grow opinions and interests and develop new interests based on the articles that they read or the videos that they watch. And this is really an ongoing and automatic process. So that's really an overview of what the persona, the animated persona is, how we create it. This may be a good time to take any initial questions, and then I will turn it over to Mariya, who will walk you through really actual demonstrations, really some of the real cool stuff, show you how these animated personas work.
Thank you, Tom. If you have any questions, you can put them in a chat, or please feel free to interrupt us at any point of time. We'll be more than happy to answer them as we go through this live. Also, I would like to use this opportunity to start a different poll, so you can vote on your favorite use case and the feature as we go through them. After Tom thoroughly described how the personas are created, I'm going to go through the fun part of showing the use cases and doing some live demo of what the personas actually do and what they look like. The first use case we are going to talk about is a Stan Lee persona. Again, as Tom mentioned, Stan Lee is the creative mind behind all of the Marvel comics. And as such, he's a very public person. So there is a lot of material about him, and there is a lot of material that he's interested in, which allowed us to create this synthetic persona. His synthetic persona continues to develop. After we define Stan Lee with his interests as well as with his routines, we see that he can we can specify that he drinks coffee in the morning and maybe grabs a snack midday, drives to work, and so on and so forth. We can also see what's trending from him in the past few days and how those trends change over 7 days, 24 hours, 30 days, and so on. And not only those trends change, but the information that he receives changes his opinions and develops his opinions, even though he does not develop anymore, but his persona does. And I'm going to be able to demonstrate it a little bit later. Just really quickly, similar to Stan Lee, we also have a persona of Vladimir Putin. Again, another very public person with a lot of known opinions and documents created by him or for him. And as you can see by comparing the trends from the last 7 days in the cloud, his interests are very different from interests of Stan Lee. Vladimir Putin is interested in Trump, Russia, China, intelligence. He reads about declassified Russia investigation, while Stan Lee reads significantly more fun information such as Comic-Con and Marvel and San Diego, that type of things. We can also do a message testing. Again, another capability that Tom mentioned. But once our personas are created and animated, they access the internet or any other data source we can point them to, which may be completely private and locked down. But our personas read and respond, and they grow based on the ideas in the documents that are fed to them. Since they become machine learning agents and they are continuously evolving, we are able to feed them messages and see how interested they are in those different messages before we actually release them to the public. I'm going to demonstrate a few examples of that. So here is the live persona of Stan Lee. As you can see, it's a little bit different than what we have seen on the screenshot because this is a live system. So right now he's reading about ATT. He's still very interested in comics, and his trends up are Superman, Star Wars, and so on. He's trended down Galaxy and Diamond. Not sure why, but he's not as interested in those anymore. At the same time, you can see what he has read in last 7 days. These are the articles that he read. You can see how interested he was in the information he read in a descending order. So the information on top, he was very interested in, superheroes, comics, and so on. As you go down the list, at some point, he's becoming a little bit less interested. So, for example, he read about Tiger King. He was somewhat interested, but not as much as he was in information regarding the comic books. You can also see the information that he read in the last 30 days. You can see what he read in the last 24 hours. Well, it doesn't appear like he read much in the last 24 hours, which is probably explainable given that everything going on in the world. There's probably not a lot of new information about comics coming out at the moment. Another thing that I wanted to point out, the personas are continuously evolving. So we start up with setting up sets of interests for them. But as they continue to receive the information, they continue learning. And we as humans have a way to adjust what they are reading. So for example, I can see what exactly he read and how he reacted to it. But I can say not interested in the content. I can say my persona shouldn't be reading that. I can also specify whether I wanted to be removed from consideration altogether, or whether I want them to look for similar articles and be more influenced by this type of information. I can communicate with Stan Lee. I can ask him questions. For example, maybe I want to ask him about his wife. So I'm going to ask, who is your wife? And I got the answer based on his biography, John Clayton Buckhook. Well, I'm a human. I may ask a question in a different way. So maybe instead of asking who's your wife, I'm going to ask what's your wife's name? And I got the same answer. Well, I only got the first name, I guess, because I did say more specifically that I want the name. Maybe I want to ask something more opinionated. Maybe I want to ask him, who is your favorite superhero? And he tells me it's a Spider-Man, which is in line with what true Stan Lee would have thought. And by the way, if you noticed, I misspelled superhero, but the system was smart enough to still know what I mean. How about what is, let's say, what do you think of Hulk? He says that Hulk would be in a fight with Thor. What is Superman's weakness? Pneumonia. Well, so this answer actually puzzled me, but when I went and did a little bit of research, I found out that one of the actors who portrayed Superman in one of the earlier movies actually died from pneumonia, and that article was rebroadcast in the last month. So I'm assuming that was the article that Stan Lee read recently, which is why he thinks that pneumonia is part of it. Moving on to a slightly different type of a persona. So Stan Lee and Putin are examples of real famous people who are out there. But we can also create synthetic personas, which are more of representative of a certain population or maybe an expert in certain area. In this particular case, what I'm showing you is a synthetic persona of COVID-19 Medicaid subject matter expert. And here's the reason and a use case for why this persona was created. When COVID-19 started, there were so much information about COVID-19 everywhere. But at the same time, it was so information rich that it was very difficult to find the information specifically relevant to the topic you are interested in. There was information about shortages and vaccines and numbers and rates of death and all kinds of information. So I wanted to create something a little bit more narrow, where specifically I wanted to know how COVID-19 impacts Medicaid regulations, what changes were introduced to Medicaid, and how any of the Medicaid patients were impacted. You know, the obvious thing you can say, like, okay, you can go to any of the search engines and you can say COVID-19 Medicaid and see what comes back. Well, that doesn't really work that way, because you're going to get a lot of information that is not related to COVID-19, or related to COVID-19 but not to Medicaid, or maybe it's related to Medicaid but not to the regulation. It just mentions the word Medicaid. And the good thing about the persona is that it's trainable. When I first set it up, I did get some information that was not very relevant to what I wanted it to be. But within a couple of days of continuously providing feedback and just marking, yes, read this article, no, don't read this article, seek similar, just hide this, avoid similar, very quickly the persona was trained to understand what it is that I'm looking for. And as you can see here, it does now mostly read about patients, COVID, health. It's interested in Medicaid. It does talk about insurance and specific states, since Medicaid is state-based. You can see that the favorite reads are from Medicaid topics as well. And going through the topics, they're all about insurance and specifically Medicaid. My other persona is COVID scammer. Again, I'm still interested in COVID-19, but for this particular purpose, I want to know what fraud schemes are out there, how somebody who is dishonest would try to gain advantage of the pandemic. And same situation, you see, even though this persona is COVID-19 related as well, their interests are very different. They're talking about fraud, attorney, coronavirus as well, prosecution, and guilty pleas, unemployment fraud, and so on and so forth. My third COVID-19 related persona, I call it COVID Curious Mind, and this persona is really a researcher. So this persona is interested in any ongoing research regarding coronavirus vaccine, treatment, and so on. The reason why I described these three persona in such detail is because now I want to show you how I can test our messaging across different personas. So let's say my first message is going to be, let's start with this one. So the first message I want to test is a simple one. I'm going to buy toilet paper. And I'm going to rescore it so we see whether my personas are interested or how they react to it. As you can see, when I said I'm going to buy toilet paper, my COVID scammer perked up. COVID scammer is interested in the topic, even though I haven't said anything about fraud or COVID-19, but we all know the scheme with toilet paper being just disappearing from the shelves and people stockpiling on it. So COVID-19 scammer is smart enough to understand that there is something in there for him. I am also using a few more personas I haven't introduced before. I have Dave, who is only interested in European soccer. Then I also have Taylor Ray, who is a synthetic persona of average teenager. She's interested in entertainment, movies, social media. We are actually using AI-generated picture to depict her, since we don't want somebody to come to the internet and find their picture there. So this is not a real person. She's synthetic, but she's completely representative of the opinions. Jamie Little is a little bit older. He is a financial analyst. He's interested in investment, stock exchange, and how the market behaves. So as you can see, neither Taylor nor Jamie are particularly interested in toilet paper, but COVID scammer is. So let's see what happens if I make my message a little stronger. So maybe instead of just saying I'm going to buy toilet paper, I'm going to say I can resell it at double price. All of a sudden, my COVID scammer is really interested. Now I'm speaking his language. It's a little bit disappointing that Jamie is interested as well. And I don't know why he's interested, but maybe it is just that since he's interested in the market, he's interested how it's going to be impacting the toilet paper as well. On the opposite side, sometimes we just need to go buy toilet paper. It may have nothing to do with the scheme. So maybe if I say something like, I am going to buy toilet paper and eggs, we're almost out. Let's see what that would do to the message. Now COVID scammer is significantly less interested. It doesn't sound like there is much for him there anymore. Taylor, on the other end, is interested. And part of the reason is because Taylor, amongst other things, is interested in the culinary. So when we said eggs, she's thinking, well, I don't know, maybe we're going to make something cool for dinner. Let's try to test another message. So how about I post a message something like this. Hello, would you be interested in buying a proven vaccine for $1,000? We only have limited quantity available, so you have to act fast. So imagine you got a phone call like that. What would you think? Well, what's interesting, COVID scammer picked it up. He's interested. He thinks that there is a way to make some money there. My researcher is interested as well. I guess this persona is a little bit naive. They do think that that may be a real vaccine. But what if I make the claim a little bit stronger? Again, I'm going to put some urgency to it. I'm going to add wire the money immediately to claim your vaccine. What would that do to our personas? Well, COVID scammer is even more interested. All of a sudden, we are speaking his language. There is money in it for him. Now, what if I add a Medicaid component to it? Maybe I can say that it's not just the money. Maybe I can say, wire the money or enter your Medicaid ID. Well, the COVID scammer is still interested, very interested. The researcher is interested as well. He still didn't pick up that there is something fishy going on. He's a researcher. But what's interesting here, the Medicaid SME all of a sudden is now interested too, because now we're talking about the Medicaid population. So there is something in there for that persona as well. And again, our synthetic personas of average people, they aren't particularly interested. They don't care. They are not going, I guess it's good to know that they are not going to react to a message like that. Now, what if I try some completely different message, just to show that not every vaccine-related message would be treated as something that is potentially fraudulent. Like here is a pretty legitimate message. There is some early research suggesting that calquence is effective in treating coronavirus. So all of a sudden, the scammer is not interested. There is nothing in that message for him. It is about true research. But the researcher is interested because we're talking about specific treatment. We're talking about specific research and specific vaccine, even though we didn't say vaccine in here. But he did pick up that calquence is something that is used to potentially treat coronavirus. Let's try a few more messages. So this message is mostly targeted toward our regular people, our synthetic persona of Taylor and Jamie. I just want to say I'm tired of social distancing and coronavirus. Let's see what happens here. As you can see here, neither of our COVID-19 personas are interested because even though they're COVID-19 personas, they have very specific narrow focus. This is their complete goal. I created them because I don't want them to bring every article that mentioned coronavirus. So they're not interested. And because the message is so generic, Taylor and Jamie, Jamie is a little interested, but not that much. So I guess the message is too generic for anyone to pay too much attention to it. But now, what if I add a little bit more to it? What if I say, I'm tired of social distancing and coronavirus. I want to go socialize with friends. So now both of my personas of synthetic people are significantly more interested. Taylor more than Jamie because she does want to go out. The COVID-19 personas are still not interested. Alternatively, maybe I change the tune of it. Maybe I say I'm tired of social distancing and coronavirus, but instead of going to socialize with friends, I'm interested in economic recovery. I know it's important for economic recovery. Now Jamie is really interested because we started talking about economy and finances, and that's something that he's very interested about. There are so many things you can do with this message set to identify who may be interested in what and to test your message. As you can see, it is smart enough to pick up on underlying tone and to figure out all the correlations with the things that go on in the world, even when we don't specifically spell it out, which I think makes it a very interesting capability. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions. And can we start our second poll, please? I'd like to know what features you all are mostly interested in. We'll see the results after I'm done presenting. So after talking about message testing and interacting with personas, let's see what else personas can do. Here's a use case 3, COVID-19 simulation. You know, messaging is cool, but what do you do with it in the real world? Well, here's one example of what would you do. Social distancing simulation is a persona-based tool that allows you to see how different segments of population would react to messages from different influencers, telling them to either stay home or don't social distance and go out and party, and how that would impact the spread of a disease, and then from there on, actual probability of death, number of deaths, hospital beds availability, and all of the other metrics that decision makers are interested in. The objective of this COVID-19 simulation is to provide a tool for healthcare professionals and government officials that would allow them to make a decision to track clusters of need across all of the geolocation, and to model how they need to build their policies and how they need to message those policies in order to accomplish the benefits they desire. Let me show you what that simulation looks like live. So as you can see, we started out with a quarantine. So all of our personas, all of the different segments are pretty much staying at home. And then we used one of the influencers. You can define various types of influencers who tells you, go party. You can use multiple influencers at the time. You can also use multiple influencers where they say different things. One of them may be saying that go party, while the other person is saying stay home. And all of a sudden, you see how all of these different segments may change their decisions. Some of them are more impacted, some of them are less impacted, but they do change their behavior. And from there on, the decision spread projection changes as well, same as the number of changes, or number of cases changes, and you can predict how your population is going to be impacted by your choice of messaging and your choice of message. The interesting part about doing simulation like this is that any existing model relies on set of assumptions. When we assume that certain percent of people is going to stay home, or we assume that the disease is going to spread at a certain rate, when we are doing simulation, we don't need to make assumptions. We can test what is going to happen and change the parameters on the spot. Well, to close it off, what are the personas? The personas themselves are representatives of either a particular famous persona or segment of a population or a specific body of knowledge. But they are so much more than that, because the personas are built in a way that is easy to integrate into your larger solution. As you have seen in our previous use case, you can have your personas integrated, let's say, with intelligent chatbot. So all of a sudden they understand communication, voice communication, so they can not only read but understand spoken speech. by integrating with intelligent chatbot. We can change how our personas behave and what kind of information they receive by modifying the data feeds. Again, the personas you have seen so far are trained using the open source data, mostly regular news feeds. But those data feeds could be as specialized as they need to be. The personas can be reading some intelligence memos that are highly classified, or they can be reading some specialized research documents, kind of like in the case of COVID-19. We do have a COVID-19 brain that specifically reads highly scientific documentation and understands it to the point where it knows what all of those different DNA sequences mean, because that's the purpose of that particular persona. The personas can be integrated with AutoML capabilities, so all of a sudden it can make opinions, it can create opinions, predictions, simulations, as it happened in the case of simulating COVID-19 spread. It can be connected to custom UI, so it can look completely different depending on what your particular needs are. It can be integrated with RPA, so it can, for example, interact with social media and react there, post their opinions, or react to messages, kind of how I showed it to you, built in a native website, but it doesn't have to be on that website. Those messages and opinions can be also transferred to any other interface that we are interested in. And with that, I'm going to transition it back to Alan.
Thanks, Mariya. Nice job on that. I hope everybody's excited about some of the work that we're doing with personas as the NCI CTO team is. We're really doing some very cutting edge modeling and simulation associated with how humans are interacting with AI, and especially how they are trying to gain more insight from the data that they have. As I mentioned earlier, we talked about our Empower Evolve platform, and I wanted to show you what this interface actually looks like. This is a commercially available tool. It's been used in the commercial space for about the last year for a variety of different hospitals, showing some of the AI activities that they have going on. And this is really a fully tailored view that shows all the AI activities that can be going on in in any particular ecosystem or enterprise. And it's really exciting for us because it allows us to track performance of not only things like the animated personas that you saw today, but also really any empowerment that we have deployed inside an environment, as well as the development activities that are going on and their performance within that environment as well. And so we're using AI to drive how we are monitoring AI, and at the end of the day, that's really the only way that we can provide the transparency that we want to with the needs of our customers. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I hope everybody enjoyed the animated personas that we presented today. And as usual, if there are any questions, our contact information is listed on the title slide. And so that concludes our part of the presentation. So if anybody has any questions, please, put those in the question box right now. All right, and I don't see any questions. So Mariya, Tom, again, thank you very much for the great presentation. And for those on the WebEx, we look forward to doing another event next month on one of our other AI empowerments. So thank you for your time, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.